Art Loft is brought to you by
Where there is freedom, there is expression. The Florida Keys and Key West.
the Miami-Dade County Tourist Development Council, the Miami-Dade County Department of Cultural Affairs, and the Cultural Affairs Council, the Miami-Dade County Mayor, and the Board of County Commissioners, and the Friends of South Florida PBS.
Art Loft. It's the pulse of what's happening in our own backyard, as well as a taste of the arts across the United States.
There's definitely a tradition from modernism onwards of being very, very conscientious about the materials that we use.
In this episode, the marriage of architecture and art, and creators who use the city as their canvas.
My interest is in using systems and numbers because I felt that it went directly to the way we form an idea of the world.
In the stillness of was it always as easy?
For women to express ourselves and have control and say over our body. And especially in dance, it's so cathartic.
Has it always been this way?
We try to bring you into a space where women are unapologetic and powerful and embracing their sensuality and telling their story without shame. I'm a dancer and choreographer and the founder of Alma Dance Theater, all-female-centric dance company based here in Miami, Florida. I grew up around North Beach area, this little pocket of culture. You have people from all of the Caribbean. I really fell in love with dance very passionately at a young age. I trained in ballet, jazz, hip-hop, contemporary. I've also been a stripper. I used to shy away from that and feel like I had to apologize for it. But there's a very specific style of dancing that happens using your body as like a powerful, hypnotic instrument. I love it. When I got a taste of creating and bringing my ideas to life, I knew I wanted to be a choreographer. The relationship between me and the dancers, it's such an intimate and beautiful journey.
With Alma Dance Theater, I just felt so at home. All of us being together from different backgrounds and different culture, all together as women. I was born here in Miami. My family is from the Bahamas. The whole island culture, I kind of carry it along through my dancing. When I dance, I feel very fierce. Real power that really makes me want to make my moves bigger, more powerful.
The story I'm telling through dance, I always say it's sex-positive feminism. We're here on stage because we're choosing to be, and this language is not because somebody else is asking us to do it or sell it, like we're doing it for ourselves.
To see Alma Dance Theater live, head to their website for show info.
New Industry is really inspired by urban architecture, industrial engineering. We're really looking to a lot of very exciting South Florida artists to utilize these everyday construction materials in new and innovative ways.
I was exploring the human figure. I was trying to simplify it in a way where I used 3 simple lines of different thicknesses to embody the human figure. My name is Norman Silva, and I'm an artist. This is by far my largest exhibition. This piece is called Alone. These pieces of steel came from my backyard. So I cut them up I added a little bit of a neck in here, and I created a person, a human figure in the simplest way. 3 lines, different thicknesses, different textures. The reason why it's called alone is coming from that saying, being alone in a crowd. This particular person within the piece, if you notice, it has a little shinier head than the others, so it kind of stands out a little bit. Even though it is within all of the rest of the people in there, it feels alone. If you look around, you could start seeing different personalities in the other people within the piece. Like this couple, there's an older lady, I like to say, there's another couple over here gossiping. So there's a crowd, a scene is happening within this particular little piece. My current series of sculptures are basically an outlet from my inner architect. I love the materials that I'm using right now, the wood, the concrete, the steel.
There's definitely a tradition from modernism onwards of being very, very conscientious about the materials that we use in fine art. So the show really does that in a very beautiful and lyrical way. I am Taryn Mahler-Nickel, and I'm the chief curator here at the Frank C. Ortis Art Gallery and Exhibit Hall, Pembroke Pines. More rugged materials, such as weathered wood, have been placed in beautiful symmetrical formations, such as Norman Silva's. And then we have everyday materials like concrete being used for bases. It definitely challenges what people expect to see from a contemporary fine art piece.
I love admiring buildings, and I see them as giant sculptures. I see them as pieces of artwork. You could look at some of the buildings downtown Miami that are incredible, and you look at them and they could be, in a smaller sense, could be put as sculptures in a gallery.
The most exciting elements of the show is the heavy emphasis on three-dimensional pieces. This is a very sculpture-centric show, and each of these pieces will likely look very different according to the differing contexts that they're presented in. So in this gallery space in particular, we really emphasize lighting. So there are many different shadows that are cast. There are changes in depth as you view the works from differing angles. It's also a way that the artist releases control. It can form the work up to a point, but after the work leaves their studio, they're really placing a lot of trust in the curatorial team to showcase their work and tie it to an overarching idea in a very provocative way. The Frank is about 2 years old. We have a year-round open call to artists. We really do invite every single cultural producer to submit their work here to the Frank. We want to see what people are making. So regardless of their level of professionalism, whether they're just starting out or they're seasoned, lifelong artists who really have honed their practice, we encourage everyone to submit their portfolio to us and keep us abreast of what it is that they're working on.
The way in which I create either comes from an idea at first that I sketch down, or from something that I pick up and see something in it that inspires me to create something out of it.
Walking down the street, we're on a sidewalk and we see cracks and imperfections in the concrete. Maybe after seeing an exhibition like this, we have more of an appreciation for these little details in our lives, and we're able to see things slightly differently.
The Frank offers artist-led workshops that are free for all ages and abilities. Visit thefrankgallery.org, click Events, and then click Free at the Frank. Next up, soar over Massachusetts, where a piece of public art is transforming the sky. Jared Bowen from WGBH Boston reports.
Good morning, Lawrence Traffic, Hot Air Balloon 869, Uniform Sierra. Do you have me this morning?
For this story, we'll begin at the end. On Monday, we'd been taking a pretty serene ride over Andover, floating above the treetops in a hot air balloon designed by artist Doug Aitken, a shimmering, inflatable sculpture he's titled New Horizon.
I see New Horizon as really kind of a sculpture of time. It's something which is, it's temporary, it's changing continuously. When it stops, we can have these kind of incredible communal moments.
But on this flight, we got communal fast. The wind picked up and we had to touch down. After 2 failed attempts, our pilot spotted a make-do landing strip. This small, grassy median at the intersection of 2 busy routes at rush hour.
Bend your knees. Hang on, hang on. Right
There, hold. Suddenly, New Horizon was on the ground, its silvery skin collapsing in a tired exhale. Cars stopped. The state police rushed in.
Behind us, there's cars pulling over, diving in, helping, you know. I think it's just, it's miraculous.
We had an exhilarating landing.
Pedro Alonso is the guest curator of Art and the Landscape, an effort by the trustees of reservations to disrupt the group's historic sites, not with art that's ornamental, but art that engages. Jeppe Hein's mirrored Labyrinth at World's End in Hingham, Sam Durant's Meeting House at the Old Manse in Concord, and Alicia Quade's Exploration of Reality at the Crane Estate in Ipswich.
I'm convinced that the public wants art. They just don't want to feel intimidated or uninformed when they look at it. And this is the kind of artwork that people will be surprised. That was art?
Alonso also takes a devilish glee in the element of surprise. Remember the photograph that mysteriously appeared on Boston's former Hancock Tower one day? That was Alonso teaming with French artist J.R. They did it again 2 years ago, installing an image of a child peering over a Mexican border wall into the U.S.
That kind of surprise is, for me, much more valuable than a programmed event.
Well, what does it do to plunk a sculpture down in the middle of rush hour traffic, literally in the middle of rush hour traffic?
Oh, well, first, people take notice. You know, people definitely take notice. And I think it's the kind of thing that just changes your day. You're going to think very differently about how your day went.
In a world where everything is so homogenized, it's so repetitious, you know, we need disruption. We need moments of kind of a crack in our daily reality.
Hundreds of feet up in the air before our sudden landing, artist Doug Aiken says when Alonso commissioned him to create a piece for Art and the Landscape, he knew zero about hot air balloons. So he used the idea of the classic American road trip as a point of departure.
It's kind of baked into our DNA, this idea of the other, this idea of disappearance or kind of moving into the landscape, a landscape that we don't know. You know, I think there's an aspect of this project that's intensely physical. I couldn't have said it better than that sound.
The California-based artist and filmmaker is a big thinker and creator. He's animated an entire Manhattan block with his piece, Sleepwalkers. He curated Station to Station, a train that doubled as a light sculpture as it crossed the U.S. And in underwater pavilions, he submerged giant sculptures off the California coast.
The idea of community, the idea of these kind of flashpoints across the landscape has been very provocative.
New Horizon has been popping up, and in our case, floating across Massachusetts for the last 2 weeks, moving from Martha's Vineyard to the Berkshires. In daylight, it's a 100-foot-tall beacon. At night, it's a floating light show. And wherever the balloon goes, people gather for music, speakers, and conversation in organized happenings.
And they see this object and they track it down and suddenly they're there and, you know, it's almost like a kind of hallucination.
It's what we saw too. People coming out of their homes, taking a break from work. It's from up here that we saw how different our community looks. In the lushness of summertime, Massachusetts presents as a veritable rainforest.
Those moments, you know, when you have a kind of awakening, when you really kind of see the mundane and it becomes vital and fresh and real again.
And New Horizon reminds us that a lot of life, nature, fate, it's all out of our control. Minutes before our adventuresome landing, Aiken told me he even planned for the unplannable.
It's a very rogue project. In the end, you know, it's kind of about improvisation. It's about the sense of openness, and we don't really know what's going to happen tonight or tomorrow, and I kind of love that.
Especially when a grounded hot air balloon makes you appreciate an otherwise benign traffic median on a whole new level.
The Art Deco Historic District was put on the National Register of Historic Places, and it was significant because it was the first neighborhood of 20th century buildings to be put on the National Register. My name is Howard Breyer. I'm a volunteer tour guide with the Miami Design Preservation League. We'll be doing an Art Deco walking tour of the historic district of Miami Beach. Two events in the latter half of the 1920s changed the course of history for Miami Beach as a resort. First, in 1926, a major hurricane had a direct hit on the city. Hundreds of people were killed, much property was destroyed or severely damaged. Then in 1929, the stock market crashed, and many of the wealthy people who were coming here also lost much of their money. So the nature of Miami Beach as a resort changed in the 1930s. If you look up and down Ocean Drive, most of the buildings that you see were erected as hotels in the 1930s, primarily for a middle-class clientele. Art Deco was a style of architecture begun in Europe early in the 20th century. There was a big exhibit in Paris in 1925 that featured Art Deco architecture and design. People from all over the world went to that exhibit and brought Art Deco home with them. Miami Beach has about 800 Art Deco buildings, one of the highest concentrations of any city in the world. The Breakwater Hotel across the street was erected in 1940. And I'll point out a few of its features that are common to Art Deco buildings here. Number one, the front facade is symmetric, meaning if you fold it in half, it's the same on both sides. Often Art Deco buildings here give a sense of movement. The breakwater looks almost like a ship, the breakwater sign being its mast. The railings on the roofline look like the railings on a cruise ship. So it almost looks as if it's about to leave its foundation and go out into the ocean behind us. The next building we'll look at is the original Congress Hotel immediately across the street. If you look at the roof line, you see it goes up in steps on both sides. That's called a ziggurat that was first developed in Mesopotamian architecture, later adopted by the Egyptians. And Egyptian architecture and design was popular in many places around the world in the 1920s and 30s because of the discovery of King Tut's tomb there in 1922. Next, you'll notice the ledges over the windows. The nickname for those here are eyebrows. They served a very important function. They provide shade for the interior, keeping it cooler, especially important for when these buildings were not air conditioned. And finally here, if you look at the Congress Hotel sign, the font that the letters are in was a very popular font in the 1930s. So our next stop will be in the lobby of the original part of the Victor. The architectural features that we see in the lobby are original. So the first feature we'll look at is the floor. The material is called terrazzo. It was first developed in Italy. It's stone chips mixed in with a composite. And as it dries, it could be molded into different shapes and dyed various colors. Most of the terrazzo floors in Miami Beach Art Deco buildings are the original floor. And finally, these are considered classic Art Deco chandeliers. The Essex House Hotel, it's another Art Deco building. This was erected in 1939. You can see the terrazzo floor like we saw in the Victor. You see these three arrows in the floor. Up until 1950, illegal gambling was popular in many Miami Beach hotels. At its height, in the late 1940s, up to 200 Miami Beach hotels featured illegal gambling. So sometimes the hotel would put an indication in the floor of where the gambling was taking place so people wouldn't have to ask at the front desk. Miami Beach is noted for its colorful buildings. When these buildings were first erected, they were painted primarily neutral colors. Off-white was the most common color. For the most part, the colorful buildings didn't come into play until the early 1980s. Today, the current trend is to go back to more neutral colors, especially white, which is in line with the overall design trend in the United States today.
The Miami Design Preservation League has information about their tours and info on everything Art Deco on their website. Next up, ICA Miami takes us on a journey from the studio of artist Charles Gaines to Miami's Design District, where his installation uses numbers to make sense of cities and landscapes.
He's using very coded, strict rules, using numbers to establish the coordinates of his beautiful paintings of landscapes.
There's the system that's creating the gesture, and then there's the artist that's creating the gesture simultaneously.
My interest is in using systems and numbers because I felt that it went directly to the way we form an idea of the world. The ideas that I investigate are driven through social and cultural concerns, not for the, sort of establishing universalities and undermining the differences between things, but to actually amplify those differences. I started this series like 25 years ago, and it might be even more. I don't want to think about it. And it's accumulative, that is, it's like an animated drawing. The trees get denser and denser. Each tree represents one moment in that process. When you look really close, it just looks like a grid, but when you stand back, when you step away from it, the shape of the tree unfolds. And it works out that the space at the ICA, the wall, this is quite a large space, and it really requires a work that can command a presence in that space.
How could we open without the work of Charles Gans? The beautiful paintings on plexiglass that he makes are really at the center point, the nexus of conceptual art, photography, and landscape. What a better place, what a better setting than this to meditate on those subjects.
When you think about the history of painting and you think about an artist like Jackson Pollock and this sort of ego male in the studio spewing his guts, and there's so much importance given to the gesture. And what Charles Gans is examining is, well, why does that gesture have value and what is the meaning when your brain can respond in the same way to something created by a system?
The idea of trying to work in this large scale was the principal reason why I went back into working in this series.
Institute of Contemporary Art Miami has more from conceptual artist Charles Gans in the video section of its website at icamiami.org/channel.
I'm Mickey Umo, a multidisciplinary artist. I always wanted to study art, pure art. But my mom started like, okay, why didn't you try architecture? She was kind of afraid. As an artist, you always, struggle a little bit. I really love it. And, I never regret that. Architecture is an art. In Thunderbolt Cities, it's about these cities that are created for profit. What's more important, the machines, the cars, or the humans? It's about these cities that are unwelcoming, like empty buildings, broken developments, like underwater real estate, people who live in spaces that are not human. It's like a distortion of what we should be doing, That's the message. And that's why I use slate and this like cold material. You can cut yourself, actually. And that's what I want to express with this. It's like this cold city and, sometimes dangerous. It's like a part of my life. I've been in this dangerous city. I grew up in Caracas, Venezuela. And here you see like a line of people waiting for a public transportation. They spend there like an hour. You say, why? Transforming the perspective. That's what I look into when I light the sculptures, to create like a different perspective, but in a very minimal way. Why I put the sculptures inside the pool, for example, is to demonstrate some cities are underwater. You can see it either way. Or we are going underwater, or we are getting out of the water. And that's up to you. There's a lot of cities that has that warmth, you feel that. Like if you go to San Francisco, for example, I don't want to be, apocalyptic or anything. It's just like a point of view. I love to work any kind of medium, working a lot in collaborations. I think it's part of the journey. I love doing, music. I work with this band called High Alive. We've been working together for 3 years. We have been doing festivals, different stages. For me, art is like a savior. It's like something that heals. There's always something to say.
To see the world from Mickey Humo's perspective, follow him on Instagram. Continue the conversation online. Art Loft is on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at ArtLoftSFL.
Art Loft is brought to you by
Where there is freedom, there is expression. The Florida Keys and Key West.
the Miami-Dade County Tourist Development Council, the Miami-Dade County Department of Cultural Affairs, and the Cultural Affairs Council, the Miami-Dade County Mayor, and the Board of County Commissioners, and the Friends of South Florida PBS.